Joined here by Kathleen Sgamma, who's the president of the Western Energy Alliance. It's an oil and gas industry group. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
My pleasure.
So we are going to hear supporters of Republican candidate for governor Walker Stapleton say that if the Democrat Jared Polis is elected, that it is going to decimate the oil and gas industry in our state. Is that an exaggeration?
Well, I wouldn't use the word decimate. Certainly the oil and natural gas industry will work with whoever is elected governor. It's what we do. Coloradans are practical people. We would expect that the governor will understand, whoever that is, will understand the economic contribution the oil and natural gas industry makes, the fact that we're providing abundant, affordable energy for the constituents of Colorado, and so we would expect to work with whomever is elected.
Would it be fair to say, based on his past policy positions, that Mr. Polis would be the most antagonistic to energy of any recent Colorado governor?
I would agree with that, sure. From supporting ballot initiative or funding ballot initiatives that would have basically shut down the industry in Colorado, to several pieces of legislation as a congressman that never got passed, thankfully, but were very hostile to the industry. A Governor Polis would have a lot to show the industry that he could work with us and be practical. So
let me ask you a practical question. Most signs suggest that he is going to win. Does that mean that the oil and gas industry is less likely to vociferously oppose him in the election because you think you're going to have to work with him?
Well, I think we'll work with whomever is elected. You know, I don't know the numbers on who's supporting whom and which candidate. I would say that there is a lot of nervousness about a Governor Polis in the industry.
But is there hesitancy to go after somebody if it's likely they're going to win?
Yeah, I would say that's a general principle, but I don't know that it's clear that Congressman Polis is going to win. I think the polling is not clear yet, and I think it's anybody's race at this point. I don't think we've seen all the money and the ads and the real campaigning just yet.
So there were thousands of oil and gas workers who gathered at the Capitol this week for a big rally, and we heard some of them say that they feel like they are in an industry that is under siege. And I'm curious who exactly you're under siege from, because the President loves you, Congress loves you, the Democratic governor of Colorado loves the oil and gas industry. So who with power is after you guys these days?
Well, there are a lot of politicians who would like to see the oil and natural gas industry go away, but practically speaking, we get over 80% of our overall energy in this country from oil, natural gas, and coal. So we're not going away anytime soon. We enable people to heat their homes in the winter and cool them in the summer. We provide the feedstock for your electronics and your smartphone, and you know, the clothes you wear are made from oil and natural gas products. So the electricity that you use. So we provide such a huge portion of the energy that Americans rely on. So it's frustrating to us sometimes that some people are hostile to our industry. I think we're often targeted by the environmental lobby, which would like to see all oil and natural gas go away, as if we could have 100% renewables tomorrow. Sounds like a great concept, but it's not practical. And that's why, you know, when you look at things like Congressman Polis's 100% renewables proposal by 2040, it's very convenient because he won't be in office in 2040 to be held accountable. But, you know, energy's not like that. We provide energy that powers people's lives. And if there's an alternative that can do everything that oil and natural gas does, then it will compete in the marketplace, and by 2040 or 2050, it might take over. But at this point, with the technology that we have, all reasonable projections show oil and natural gas will continue to be a primary energy source in the United States and the world from 2050 and beyond. So we want to work with who's ever the governor, but you know, we don't think that those types of policy proclamations are necessarily practical.
One last question for you as it relates to the governor's race. Do you get the sense that Congressman Polis has softened his antagonism toward oil and gas over the years? It certainly seems from some of his rhetoric that he doesn't hold some of the hardline stances that he used to.
Well, I think he's trying to run for governor in a practical state. Coloradans generally, obviously we have our extremes on right and left, but in general, Coloradans are practical people. So I think he's trying to sound more reasonable now while he's being elected. But if you look at some of his proposals, he's saying, okay, 2,500-foot setbacks, I don't support that, but I support 2,000-foot setbacks. Well, that's a distinction without a difference. It does about the same thing. It puts off limits huge amounts of oil and natural gas in Colorado.
Let's talk about that. That 2,500-foot setback, that's the point of Initiative 97. On Monday, they're supposed to turn in their signatures to see if they can get on the ballot. Current setbacks are 500 feet or 1,000 feet from schools and homes. They say that they need a 2,500-foot setback for health and safety, and I'll hear the industry say it'll kill jobs. If we're talking about health and safety, why are we debating jobs?
Well, first of all, who is more healthy and more safe than people who are fully employed and can afford health care and good food and exercise? I mean, the foundation of good health is a good job. But I think what gets lost in that debate is the fact that we are heavily regulated, as we should be. And so oil and natural gas development is done in a way that protects public health, the environment, air, water. I mean, we have to conform with very strict regulations to ensure that we are protecting public health and safety. And that's not possibly in the future, that's now. Colorado has very strong regulations to ensure that development is done in an environmentally responsible manner.
But here's my question. The proponents of the increased setback will say it's necessary for health and safety, and industry will say, but what about the jobs? Why not debate them on health and safety and say, you know what, there aren't health and safety benefits from the $2,500 setback, or 2,500-foot setback. Why debate it in an apples to oranges comparison?
I don't think we do. I think we talk about how heavily regulated the industry is in this state. I mean, we're constantly talking and trying to, again, convince people that that any risks from oil and natural gas development are managed. And if a company does make a mistake and there is a problem, they're held liable and have to clean it up. And they're held monetarily liable as well.
500 and 1,000-foot setbacks reasonable in your view?
Yes, I think that was a balance achieved through a cooperative process that is reasonable and balanced.
Okay, and is your thought not 1 foot more, that that's where it needs to be? Because Congressman Polis will say, well, let's split the difference or something like that.
Why reopen that? You know, that was the result of Governor Hickenlooper putting in place a task force and working with stakeholders and looking at all angles of the issue. And so why reopen that debate?
Well, you'll hear people say, Broomfield City Councilwoman Guyleen Castriato was on this program earlier this week, and she says, well, reopen it because we're not talking about single pads anymore. We're talking about these mega pads that are much more imposing on neighborhoods and have a lot more industrial work concentrated at one spot. Why not reopen it for that reason?
Because that's the way we've been developing for quite some time. I did listen to that interview, and some of her information was off. We've been regulating, or Colorado has been regulating, hydraulic fracturing and drilling operations with today's technology. We have had, since the Ritter administration and now the Hickenlooper administration, basically a rulemaking every year on different topics. So our regulations are not old. They're based on today's technology and they're based on today's regulatory procedures.
Last question for you. The oil and gas industry has been running on television what appear to me to be basically campaign commercials nonstop during campaign season, out of campaign season for years now on this station and others, clearly trying to influence the way people see your industry. Is it moving the needle?
Well, I think that gets back to your question of why aren't we talking about the health and safety? We are talking about the health and safety, and some of those commercials are about just that, showing people how heavily regulated it is and how we are improving health and safety and making sure it's protected. So yes, I think there's a need for constant public education on our industry because we're not, you know, just a shoe factory off and people forget about it. We are in areas near where people live, because oil and natural gas is not just where it's always convenient, it is spread throughout various areas. And if you look at northeastern Colorado, north of Denver, that's been an oil and natural gas producing field for over a century. So that has had production for a long time and people have moved into those areas. So, you know, as that is a situation that does create some conflict, and so we do have to educate the public, and we're constantly working with communities to make sure that we're placing those well pads where it works better for those communities. But it can't always just be out of there and away from everything.
All right, Kathleen Sgamma, thank you so much for coming in. Appreciate you sharing your views. Look forward to having you back.
My pleasure. Thank you, Kyle.